This is 10 minutes to 9 in the morning in London, UK, within quotation marks. And the quotation marks get more pronounced today in the context of the UK by this headline, because it seems that Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP leader and the Scottish regional First Minister, has been cleared of breaching code over Alex Salmond's inquiry. Last week, all the headings were that Nicola Sturgeon was sunk, that she was done for. Now, this report suggests that she is going to resume the campaign for an independent Scotland. And that is the main issue which was exploited by Fleet Street and their masters and mistresses, political masters and mistresses, typified by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. Now, the reason why Nicola Sturgeon being cleared of breaching the code over Alex Salmond inquiry is central is because it is the threat of breaking up the United Kingdom that the SNP has been posing that has annoyed most of the England-centric racists and anti-Scots self-seeking morons. It is those morons that are threatening the UK because of the racist hostility both to the people of Scotland and also to the people of Wales. And of course, their obliteration of the existence of Cornwall. And over the Irish Sea and the Northern Ireland, the racists in England remain absolutely contemptuous and patronizing of both factions. Those in the Northern Ireland kind of region where they want to remain in the UK and those who don't want to remain in the UK. As successive Brexiteering morons and liars and crooks like Jacob Rees-Mogg, like Boris Johnson and others have shown, they have said that they are prepared to lose Northern Ireland as part of the UK rather than concede that their stupid Brexit was a disaster that was threatening everything that has been known under the so-called UK for decades, hundreds of years. And so therefore there is this revival of the Scottish kind of indie referendum because Sturgeon has been cleared of breaking the code of conduct, ministerial code of conduct over the inquiry into Alex Salmond's behavior. And it is very likely that the cause for Scottish independence will survive and overcome the Fleet Street kind of propaganda that was capitalizing on the chance that Nicola Sturgeon would be actually found to have broken the code of conduct, which would have meant that she would have to resign as leader and as First Minister, and the impetus and the kind of appeal for the IndyRef in the next few years would have been lost. And it would then put back the cause of Scottish sovereignty and independence by a long number of years. That was the hope that the Fleet Street papers, including The Guardian, and the rest of the racists and anti-Scottish mainstream so-called papers and outlets had been banking on. That Scotland's secession from the UK would be delayed or completely made impossible for decades, or any kind of fantastic time range they would have indulged in lobbying before the public. So therefore, when we say UK within quotation marks, this is the detailed explanation of why we use the UK within quotation marks, is to do with the first thread that comes to the UK from the Scottish kind of movement for independence from UK. And that movement has received what they call Philip, F-I-L-I-P, Philip. Not the name Philip, but it's a stimulus. It's an encouragement. And the Guardian is saying that Nicola Sturgeon is saying that she's going to focus her mind and attention on the Scottish elections in Scotland that are due to be held in 6 weeks' time, and so on. So that's the first one, obviously, because depending on the actual performance at the May elections, the kind of continuing impact on the appeal for IndieRef would be watchable and worth watching, and it would be watched. And in the meantime, in the run-up to that election, 6 weeks, it is possible that Johnson and his cabal would be looking for alternative ways to show Nicola Sturgeon in a diminished political role. And it is possible to see that scenario, but I don't think that Johnson will succeed, for the simple reason that apart from that suspicion that Nicola Sturgeon had broken the ministerial code over the inquiry into Alex Salmond's alleged sexual harassment of various members of the staff while he was incumbent as the Scottish First Minister and the Scottish National Party's leader. Apart from that possibility that Nicola Sturgeon might have broken the code of conduct, there has been absolutely no change in the list of things that added together amount to showing Nicola Sturgeon strictly in the one-to-one comparison. Nicola Sturgeon in comparison with Boris Johnson as less unfit for purpose than Boris Johnson is. Let's put it this way. I'm putting this in negatives for a number of reasons which we shall be elaborating on in due course, not necessarily in the next sentence or paragraph, but contextually, Nicola Sturgeon has been performing in a way that shows her as being more competent than Boris Johnson in the day-to-day running of an administration and a party. Now, we have to kind of take a look at this odious name because of what he did to the subcontinent, Robert Clive. Now, Robert Clive is an odious name for a whole range of things, including the fact that he was a congenital liar, and he was, of course, a racist and a crook and a criminal, and he was there on the false pretense that he was running a business, East India Company. So he created that traitor, Mir Zafar Ali Khan, and he lured him and he bribed him and he misled him, and he then destroyed him after he got Sirajuddaulah out of the power in the three countries, Bihar, Orissa, and Bengal in 1757. So the name Clive is not by any means a name that our movement can or does mention in any way positively, in any way as a neutral kind of name. It's not a name, it's a symbol, it's a poison, it's a complete, absolute kind of reminder of all the wrongs that have been done in the subcontinent to millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, and the damages are continuing. And we shall come to the Financial Times in a minute. Why we call these damages continuing? Because first of all, the poverty that is the main reason for any number of people from the subcontinent to want to do what is called migrate. The poverty that is the main cause for people to want to migrate to any place. And because of the kind of connections created by the East India Company, looting and robbing, the people of the subcontinent, the first kind of route or destination they consider is the UK. And that actually alters the fact that the people from the subcontinent want to go to UK or come to UK to, quote, better themselves in terms of economic condition is a bad thing, because migration is a degeneration and a loss of most rights and most amenities and most entitlements, and the actual betterment and improving of the economic condition is elusive, more elusive than achieved material reality. And people with objectively defined high kind of level of schooling and high level of skills are deprived of the basic humanity and human rights and entitlements and dignity because of the continuation of the comparison, which is that people in the subcontinent or any other part of the world where those parts have been colonized are by that fact less equal than the people in the population of the demography in the UK, the colonizing country's population. So that is an absolute, complete, utter corruption of the reality. And that corruption continues, perpetuated to this day. And the bank, which is normally known as Black Rock, which has been called White Rock, has been the subject of an open letter recently published by Esma Bengabsia, who the Financial Times call a Muslim, whose complaints include being called a Grinch for not wearing a Christmas sweater. And she wrote the letter to Chief Executive Larry Fink. The next sentence the Financial Times says, a black ex-employee has also sued Black Group, the group, which styles itself as a responsible capitalism champion. This is the kind of language that is used by crooks and criminals in the propaganda. Absolutely. Capitalism champion. Capitalism cannot be championed. It cannot be championed. It's not some kind of hidden secret. Capitalism, a brazen system of robbery and looting and lying. And it thrives on and it depends on, it relies on irresponsibility. Not a responsible kind of thing. Its raison d'etre is to be irresponsible, to be unequal, to be lacking in care and compassion, to decry and deny universality. So that is the thing that applies to these criminals' attitude towards people from all other, let's say, backgrounds. But when it comes to the people of the subcontinent or similar, now asthma, Bengapsia, it's not defined here what her actual ethnic origin is, but it is very likely, without doing the research, because this is an uncommon name in terms of the demography that we are talking about, is most likely from one of the areas in the subcontinent. Asthma is not. Asthma is available in other countries as well, but Bengapsia sounds like very much linguistically next door to the groups and tribes and ethnicities that have the name Beng or Benga, at the beginning. Whatever her actual location in terms of the ethnicity, she is described here as a Muslim, and she has, according to this item in the Financial Times, published an open letter to Larry Fink, who doesn't sound like he's from the ethnicities in the subcontinent, but from somewhere in Europe. And what this is showing is that even the type of group that White Rock is, which was the employer, one of the employers of the many jobs simultaneously grabbed hold of and kept by the crook, George Osborne, who was the criminal, co-criminal with the crook, David Cameron. Cameron is running in the news this week as being a crooked lobbyist for one of the crooked borrowers, whatever. So if you look at the actual contents of the kind of evidence sheets or updated reports every day on what these people are doing, these ones connected with the City of London or the big business and the markets based on exploitation of the money and the deception to the society and to the public on what they are actually up to with the resources and the money and the stock that actually belongs to the people. Of course, the stocks that do belong to the people are never made available to the people, as this latest kind of series of reports about what David Cameron has been doing confirms. So the people coming here, that is to the UK, let's say, which is the so-called mother of kind of empires, doesn't make people get what they hope before coming, before migrating. before they actually sell whatever family silver they have in order to fund the journey, including fund the bribery and the other requirements on the way. Before they come here, they have all kinds of hopes and expectations. And when they arrive, they are subjected to steps and steps and steps and series of robbery. They take away their self-respect for a start, their dignity, their identity, and their confidence and their ability, therefore, to kind of, in a neutral way, to prosper, that is to say, gain the material possessions or material wealth or capacities that would contribute to their translating those by making things better back at home, which is what the pattern is, that the people migrate to a destination and then they begin to remit currency or cash back to the relations or families. Most people have relatives, not necessarily families, but most people have relatives, and the relatives are very appreciative of the contributions that the remittance each time kind of represents. And there is then a serial cycle of events that actually begins in each kind of unit. The people who are relatives or families back home. And those then construct a false and unreliable picture of the capacity of the person who has emigrated. And they suppose that this person has got more capacity, more abilities, and crucially more freedoms to be able to earn more money and then to continue to send them the money. And so therefore there has developed a complete perversion of the original plan, that is plan A, which is to migrate to a place far away, thousands of miles away, and then earn enough money, much more money than locally available in the originating country or society or region. And that disproportionate amount of money becomes a mirage, and it inflates the expectation of the people at the receiving end. While it does that, it deflates the person who is the center of all these expectations, etc., etc. So that is the general thing that applies to hundreds of millions of people who migrate to the rest of the world, let's say, not just to the UK. Hundreds of millions across the world, say from deprived so-called parts of Africa and Asia to the less deprived areas in North America, in the Gulf states, regions, in the last, let's say, take into account the last 30 years or 40 years. And there is no accounting. There is no accounting in economic terms of the depletion that happens in the economic capacity of the person. And multiply that by, let's say, 10 or 20 million. I mean, in the case of the last decade or last 40 years, let's say, in the Western European countries. There is no accounting. In fact, contrary to the kind of creepy propaganda claims made by the United Nations bureaucracy, as fronted by the most embarrassing, dishonest occupant of the post of Secretary General. I'm not saying the previous ones were any less dishonest, but the comparison between Antonio Guterres and his predecessors in that same post is that he is the most self-exhibiting and self-promoting kind of occupant that has been there in the post for decades. In fact, since Dag Hammarskjöld was murdered, Dag Hammarskjöld was the Swedish occupant of that post in the 1960s. Dag Hammarskjöld was murdered, and after that, the United Nations has not had a Secretary General who has shown anything like the commitment, universality that Dag Hammarskjöld showed. And not only has the occupant in the office of Secretary General kind of been completely disappointing and a disaster, the rest of the bureaucracy and rest of the kind of post holders have been equally absolutely uninspiring and lacking in any engagement with the aims and objects, the founding aims and objects of the United Nations Organization in the 1940s. So there is no international forum, let alone an international dynamic process of auditing the economic and social and humanitarian impacts of migration. So there is a complete, absolute lack of analysis. That is to say, there is no enlightened, reliable, coherent way forward out of the quagmire and nightmare of migration life. And this woman is not a migrant as such, apparently, because if she was employed at Black Rock, White Rock, she would have been kind of required to have a direct Western kind of Western or British-based upbringing and schooling. So she was. It takes us to Shamima Begum, doesn't it? Shamima Begum has been deprived of her citizenship by birth, British citizenship by birth. And she has not been. I'll come to Robert Clive in a minute, but this Asma Bengabsia is not another Shamima Begum in the actual CB, but she's another Shamima Begum in being denied her rights, which she would not have been robbed of had she been white. And that is the phrase I'm using from somebody else, the man who kind of staged the 2012 kind of propaganda thing for himself by giving something of his culture to the propaganda fest fronted by Boris Johnson around the 2012 games. And because it is connected with that kind of event, this man's opinions have been sought and publicized over the denial of Shamima Begum's British by birth citizenship. And we shall go back to the point that it doesn't matter whether Shamima Begum was accused of something different from this Esma Bengapsia must have been accused of internally, or must have been treated as being a kind of open to be being accused of. There are two Muslim women, or let's say Muslim by birth, I would think, both of them women, who are being denied the kind of rights that are taken for granted by white women of their age and their backgrounds in terms of schooling, etc. And that shows that what damage Robert Clive did is persisting and being perpetrated and perpetuated with aggressive forms under Johnson, and on the other hand under the so-called opposition misled by Keir Starmer. Now, this piece in The Guardian today is of course not exclusive to The Guardian. On page 3, where there is a name called Clive in The Guardian. Now, that Clive at the bottom is Clive Myrie, one of the African origin, very black-skinned British mainstream media persons. And Clive Myrie is an idiot, as the records of his utterances and his undermining glances at Muslim participants and Muslim persons featured in the news he has presented and reported on confirm. Myrie now is to replace the racist Welshman John Humphreys as the presenter of Mastermind, which they say started in 1972. And The Guardian says, typically Guardian, has been presented exclusively by men, including Magnuson, Peter Snow, Clive Anderson, and Humphreys. The broadcaster Samira Ahmed had been tipped last month to become the show's first female presenter. Now, this is a stupid, absolutely racist, and corrupt piece in The Guardian. I mean, Samira Ahmed is the definitive stooge for anti-Muslim racists in the mainstream BBC media. And Clive Myrie is a notorious anti-Muslim moron. So these two should have nothing to do with being presenters, either rumored or tipped or actual, on any mainstream media outlet, because they're prejudiced and hostile against Muslims. Muslims are the biggest faith group after the Christians in this country. So it matters. Nothing to do with the alleged or actual extent of the radicalized members of the faith. Absolute, utter majority of the ordinary Muslims are nothing to do with any radicalization or anything to do with that. It's sheer hatred of Islam and Muslims. And that is in complete violation and breach of all the agreements and conventions and charters that the UK is signatory to. And the charters are mainly, they originate from the United Nations. So that's Mairi. Now, why am I saying that? Because Mairi would obviously be included in any list of Black Lives Matter. And when he is included, he's included in his own right as a black person. We have no quarrel with that. But when he is in place, say for a very long time, he has been fronting the BBC News in the evening, BBC News channel, not the local BBC News, but he has been doing that in terms of the domestic version as well. But his main presentation, the consistent one, has been as a presenter of the BBC News channel. In which capacity Mairi has, by definition, had to talk to people, sometimes guests on the studio and on the phone, as part of some of the stories that need that kind of instant input. And while doing that, and also while kind of signing off after a piece featuring Muslims and Islam and allegations of racism and anti-Muslim prejudice, Mairi has made the facial expression in such a way as to tell his racist audience and viewers that he doesn't think much of these Muslims or much of the criticisms that they make of racists, anti-Muslims. And looking at Samira Ahmad, of course, she was launched as the definitive anti-Muslim creep who was sent to Pakistan and Afghanistan by the Channel 4 program that she was operating on. And she came back with a far heavier load of prejudice against Muslims, Pakistan, Afghanistan, whatever, than any white person known to us in the last 70 years has done in that similar way. So she is not just a coconut, this Samira Ahmad. I mean, she is an old coconut that is beyond even touch by date. That is to say, she has become too toxic to even touch. She's poisonous, and she, when presenting the BBC's so-called Viewers Watch program, News Watch or whatever, and she has manifestly obstructed all attempts by any Muslim, independent Muslim, to talk independently about the anti-Muslim and corrupt and lying and dishonest contents and narratives in the programs concerned, whatever the program might be. She has not answered emails, she has not answered phone calls, and she has not recognized the existence of Muslim people in the population, except when it is a coconut or coconutted Muslim, which is not the same thing. So Samira Ahmad and Clive Mairi being mentioned by Sarah Marsh in The Guardian shows how stupid The Guardian is. These are not people that should be in any way promoted by The Guardian under the surreptitious kind of guise that The Guardian is kind of helping the diversity drive. The BBC chose Clive Mairi because he's like an Abel Muzarewa in Southern Africa. I mean, looks very dark, very black, but he is very, very anti the black people and the history of the black people struggle. And I include, based on the similarities in the struggles, in the black category, people from both Africa and Asia, heritage wise, background wise. I mean, Abel Muzarewa was a so called bishop. Now, I have absolutely no time for the violent and corrupt and criminal and fascistic regimes that have taken place, kind of the power in Rhodesia, in Zimbabwe. I have no time at all, and I shouldn't have any time for them. Because they have been absolutely corrupt and criminal. The fact that I considered them on the evidence absolutely corrupt and criminal, remember the point, the ethical point I'm making here, does not then lend itself to be used to justify any lies against these corrupt, dishonest individuals. Think the sophistication of this distinction. And it's not easy to appreciate the kind of distinction that I make every day. You have to be rigorous in your mind and thinking, and you have to be absolutely moral and ethical. Now, Clive Myrie is going to be an exhibit, just like Samir Ahmad has been on the News Watch, whatever. The latest one, that the platform that the racists have given up. But that does not constitute any action against racism. Racism against the African people, racism against the Asian people of all backgrounds, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and racism against the Muslims, because that is an additional aggravated form of racism and part of an aggravated agenda against Muslims. Who is driving this anti-Muslim hysteria and racism and discrimination cannot be answered by focusing on one particular source. A diversity of source, a variety of source or sources are responsible in the continuing and the devising and the conception of the particular phases of the attacks against the Muslims. So Asma, I shall be looking at Asma more. Asma Bengapsia. So Esma Bengapsia has got an LinkedIn entry which calls her Senior Associate, Sustainable and Impact Investing, whatever, and she's shown as being in Greater Philadelphia. And it says that she's an investor by profession and social justice advocate by passion. She's an enthusiast of financial inclusion and socio-economic justice across racial, gender, and geographical lines. Ms. Bengapsia is a senior associate in sustainable and impact investing at an investment and wealth management firm where she is responsible for researching and identifying investment opportunities in global public markets. Most recently, Ms. Bengapsia published her findings on racial equity investment in a report titled Racial Equity Investing Opportunities for Impact and Alpha. In addition, Ms. Bengapsia is a World Economic Forum Global Shaper in Philadelphia and a board member of the American Muslim Community Foundation, which seeks to sustain grassroots movements by establishing endowments for community groups that advance spiritual well-being and social justice. Ms. Bengapsia earned a Bachelor of Science degree at New York University's Stern School of Business, where she studied finance, computing, and data science and politics. Her favorite quote is, "But still, like air, I'll rise." Now that is a quote apparently from Maya Angelou. And she has got this piece about herself in the Financial Times that was published 20 hours ago. And she has got a recollection about Financial Times publishing her article before. So she's not a radical, she's not a Islamist or anything like that, as that description I have just read shows, but yet she has been discriminated against to the point that she has been forced to write the open letter about her experience with White Rocks. And it seems that she is an American settled person, but she has been involved with Black Rocks. Now, we go back to Clive Myrie again, just after the next bit. We look at the contents of the piece in today's Financial Times that she has got on her LinkedIn connection. This is what it looks like, the Financial Times actual article. So this is what she is featuring in a LinkedIn kind of post, and this is the size of it. I mean, it's top half of the Financial Times today. She's not like a Shamima Begum, but she is being treated like Shamima Begum. Common thing they have is that both of them have been discriminated against racistly and also as based on their faith. And she is quoted here in this piece that says it's datelined from New York, and its byline is to somebody called Aziza Kasumov. Now, of course, Kasumov suggests a language linked to the Russian or related to the Russian. So Azizia Kasumov, why is the Financial Times running a piece from a likely Muslim from the Russian bloc about a Muslim woman in the financial kind of business in the USA? The Financial Times, of course, is currently edited by a woman from the Lebanon. She's a Muslim origin or Lebanese kind of person. To what extent she is Muslim or how far has she moved away from being a Muslim because of her employment as the, at least, editor on show editor of the Financial Times, I'm sure, is not known, but it will be known. And it will be known to us by looking at the contents. Now, the Financial Times, as I said, I've known several persons at the Financial Times, and for one reason or another, all of them have turned out to be shallow, let's say. Now, this one says, when this Azizia Kasumov writes from New York about Esma Bengabsia as follows. When Esma Bengabsia joined BlackRock full-time in 2018, she thought she had found the perfect launch pad for her career. Born and raised in the US, so we know she wasn't born in the UK. She was born and raised in the US. The New York University graduate looked forward to becoming one of the first hijab-wearing Muslims to work on the trading floor of the world's largest asset management manager, a company known for promoting sustainable capitalism. Her ideal ended quickly, she says. One colleague ridiculed her for saying Assalamu alaikum, a greeting in Arabic, on the phone with her parents, while another accused her of slacking off because she took short breaks to pray in the Muslim tradition. She was called a Grinch for not wearing a Christmas sweater at a festive season party and told to be American when she said she did not celebrate the holiday. With her headphones on, she overheard a male colleague who often leered at her, asking members of their team whether he should touch her and if that would constitute sexual harassment, as her co-workers egged him on. Even for a Muslim woman who had grown up in post 9/11 America, it was too much to take. She complained to BlackRock's Human Resources Department, but was told her claims of discrimination or harassment could not be corroborated. So what they're doing is that calling her a liar. And this is a serial sexual harassment aggravated by lies by the company. It's like Piers Morgan saying that Meghan Markle's statement that she was feeling suicidal after being mistreated by the royal family and the media. Piers Morgan said that he did not believe a word she said. And he said, just to make sure that he wasn't misunderstood, he said that Piers Morgan said that he wouldn't believe Meghan Markle even if she read the weather report. So this is hatred, pure, kind of congealed hatred and intolerance and denial of Muslims. In the case of Piers Morgan, it's a hatred. What it is based on, apart from the fact that Meghan Markle had been an acquaintance of him and she stopped responding to his calls. That is a solid evidence of Piers Morgan being snubbed. And Piers Morgan, who has had a very long running dispute with Jeremy Clarkson. is a very vindictive individual, as his long list of allegations against Jeremy Clarkson, as published by the Daily Mail Group, shows. So Pierce Moron was being absolutely, totally hostile to Meghan Markle, but he tailored his hostility to a profitable kind of connection. He was speaking in a way that many people in the royal family would like to have spoken against Meghan Markle but couldn't. So he was really ingratiating himself to the family of Brenda, the racist queen. That was his career move. And he staged the kind of walk out from the ITV studio, GMB studio. And within a very short time after that, Pierce Moron was greeted with unprecedented offers of high-profile platform by the likes of Andrew Neil, Brilopad Neil, who is about to launch his new channel. And this is the companies and markets, this piece in the Financial Times on page 11. And we shall be reading more of that. Essentially what these various items show, and the various items that I am referring to show, is that racism is very much the driving force in the big corporations and organizations in the UK. But also, racism is allowed to get even worse as against the victims and targets, because the likes of Clive Myrie and the likes of this Samira Ahmed, they are used as exhibits of diversity. But underneath that exhibition, the ferocious anti-black agenda is driven, as has been the case with Samira Ahmed. When the Channel 4 channel had this first multi-ethnic commissioner in the early 1980s, she completely messed up, and she became very fast the target of so many complaints by varieties of black people, African and Asian origin. Anyone who is not in this UK and anyone who is not really familiar with the intricacies and the details of the corruption of the media, mainstream media, needs to be told that the channel, for when it was launched, remember, I was one of the campaigners for such a channel. I wasn't a careerist, or I was not going to ask for a career or spot or anything. I campaigned politically for setting up a channel to repair the damage being done by the three channels at that time in the 1970s. The BBC One and BBC Two and ITV. There was no other channel. So we campaigned for a fourth channel with all kinds of lists of things that the fourth channel should offer. So when the fourth channel started broadcasting and they appointed a woman called Sue Woodward. She looked like she was from African background. She could be of mixed race. I can't say because I haven't seen her image for a long time. So Sue Woodward became an embarrassment to all kind of thinking people that had been campaigning for a fourth channel, because she didn't understand, she didn't have the depth, she didn't have anything. So I had to do the campaign to get rid of her. And I think immediately as a result of her departure from Channel 4, she was relocated in the USA somewhere. I never followed up what she did next. But whatever she did would be similar. Not maybe causing as much damage to the demography, but she would not change the ideology. She was an empty, blank person in the context of what we're talking about. Then she was kind of, look at this, sequence. All my campaigns that have as targets the likes of the Channel 4, let's say corporate entity, all my campaigns end up being abused and exploited by some criminal. Afterwards, I got rid of Sue Woodward or Woodward, whatever her last name is. I'll check it and update the records accordingly. Once that person was out of the post, or once that person was sufficiently kind of undermined during my campaign, a very efficient crook surfaced. But that crook didn't take part in the campaign, but he surfaced as the replacement for that discredited multi-ethnic commissioner. It's Freak. It's a man called Freak. And the freaky characteristics will be detailed in due course in absolute detail, because there is a lot of crime and criminality and damage and harm that this freak has caused to the community, especially multifaceted damage that this freak has done to the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets and from there to the other parts of the community. And when we got rid of this person, the first incumbent of the multi-ethnic editor, we expected that the founding campaigners, if you like, or the campaigners who helped establish the Channel 4, the aims and objects that we actually had campaigned for would be represented in the conduct and the behavior of these new or next occupant in the post of the multi-ethnic commissioner or multi-ethnic editor. Far from that case, it wasn't. And as other things that Freak Dondi has done to abuse his position and to give commission, for example, the film, the Indian kind of based film about this Indian woman who was exploited, extremely exploited. But the commission was given to Freak Dondi's former wife, a woman called Mala Dondi. And there was no scrutiny, there was nothing. Because when it comes to actual rigorous analysis and examination of the evidence, Phulon Devi was not some kind of person in the UK. Phulon Devi was a known kind of entity as a dakat or a robber, as a queen. I mean, she had been raped and she had been abused by the Brahmins and other perpetrators, and she gained kind of a profile because of her resistance to these Brahmins and revenge that she took. And all of that qualified her to be the subject of a very necessary and very important profile or series of profiles. But Channel 4 was manipulated by Frigdondi and who cheated in the narrative, in the negotiations. And he gave the money to his former wife, and nobody has published the details of the crimes that Frigdondi perpetrated. And we are going to ask Frigdondi to publish. Frigdondi is a criminal who arrived in Tower Hamlets as a parasite, who didn't live in Tower Hamlets, who didn't have anything to do with Tower Hamlets, except that like later he proved his craft by exploiting Fulan Devi's life and distorting her struggles. He arrived in Tower Hamlets as a parasite riding on the back of Darkas Dirty Howe and a number of other criminals, because they thought that the Bangladeshis needed them in the case of housing. So we shall be updating on all of that in due course. And we said to Frigdondi that no matter what he said to me during one particular unplanned meeting, because I was in the studio in the Channel 4 in Charlotte Street, and this creep comes into the room and addresses me. I had no connection with him whatsoever, and he wasn't part of the discussion there. He abused his employment, and he came there and tried to provoke me into a fight by saying that I didn't get elected by anyone to say what I said, and I was just a protester. I mean, if I was just a protester, then what was he? He was a parasite. Remember Frigdondi? He writes a thing that gets published. He writes a thing from the UK, still hanging around in the UK. He writes a thing and it gets published where? In the Deccan Herald in India. And he boasts, Frigdondi boasts, that he only writes when he gets paid. It's not a secret. What would a parasite like that know about protest? The world, the future of the world and the planet absolutely depends on protests. So the likes of Frigdondi and the other people, including this Samira Ahmed and Clive Mairi, these are not, when they're given platforms by the racist media, these are not people who represent the lives, the struggles, or anything to do with the ordinary people that come to either the UK or the Western European countries as migrants. So all the forums, all the platforms in the mainstream are obstructing the basic truth from being told about people's lives and people's rights and people's demands and people's humanity. Because when Frigdondi addressed me as a mere protester, he of course was doing so by assuming that he could question my humanity. Now, he has, of course, no idea about my humanity at all because he doesn't exist. A parasite doesn't exist as a human being, does he? A parasite by definition. And we shall be looking at his so-called books These are all parasitical so-called books that he wrote at the expense of the Bangladeshi community. And anyone watching this for the first time, or anyone not familiar to the extent that they should be to understand the various references and cross references, needs to know this, that the woman called Monica Ali, who was paid a huge sum of money compared to the ordinary people, and ordinary people, I include by ordinary people ordinary nurses. This Monica Ali is the daughter of a non-Siloti Bengali father and a white mother. These factors are very important. Who was suddenly invented and mounted to continue the attack on the Bangladeshis in Brick Lane. And it is so embarrassingly stupid and ignorant that we shall be covering all of it in a particular series of dedicated editions of this program, as we shall do on Frigdondi and on Maladondi. Some racist women in Tower Hamlets have been promoting the image of Maladondi recently. She didn't belong in here. She didn't live here. She didn't even belong to West Bengal. She was born somewhere else to a Bengali father. And she wasn't representative of the struggles and the experiences of people in Tower Hamlets, in Brick Lane, and so on. But Frigdondi and Maladondi surfaced surreptitiously. They were not part of the community meetings or community events or anything. And they only lasted a few months in Tower Hamlets, as part of the surreptitious, creepy group, including Darkest Dirty How. Now, the Darkest Dirty How is somebody that Frigdondi later denounced as very dark. So I'm not the only one who is saying it. It's important to distinguish the references to the darkness, because the dark skin misleads people into thinking that this person would be very much respectful of the dark skin and dark skin tradition. Dirty How abused a lot of Asian women, sexually and otherwise, as he confessed. So he didn't have a solidarity, ethical or moral solidarity with the community in Tower Hamlets at all. Quite why he and Frigdondi decided to exploit what they thought was a market they could exploit of homeless Bangladeshi families in Tower Hamlets in the 1970s. It's not a mystery, because they really did believe that our community was vulnerable to being exploited by the likes of them, and they did exploit them. But the whole duration lasted only few hours. But all the racists in Fleet Street or in the neighborhood, when they refer to that, they exaggerate and amplify and multiply the length of time that these creeps stayed in Tower Hamlets and did whatever they did. And whatever they did was glorified out of all reasonable, rational, kind of factual connections. When the BBC 2 broadcast a 4-part series of complete and utter lies and racist idiocy called King of the Ghetto during May 1986 on Thursdays, the last one being on the 22nd of May 1986, and written by this parasite Frigdondi. So what we'll be doing as part of the campaign will be demanding from both Channel 4 and the BBC significant damages and compensations to the community and to our campaign. Remember this, Frigdondi. We are not even we haven't even started on you. You parasite. And the same applies to the behavior of Samira Ahmed. She will have to share with our chosen charity or our chosen cause some of our money that the BBC has given to her. I mean, these are parasitical people. And Samira's African kind of coconut, Zainab Badwe. Now, Zainab Badwe is as bad as Samira Ahmed. So this is another example. Because Samira Ahmed and Zainab Badwe are open racist zealots. When the Americans attacked Iraq, Zainab Badwe was dispatched as an exhibit. She is very black and she speaks Arabic. And so they sent her to a border place bordering on Iraq or inside Iraq, if that was the fact, because it was early 1990s, so we are not talking contemporaneously, not now. We haven't seen images, so we have to check the images and see what the dispatches were datelined from. But Zainab Badwe took with her a copy of a very racist weekly at that time, either the Spectator or a copy of the Listener, which had a prominent cartoon depicted in the piece and condemning Saddam Hussein, not because of any crimes that Saddam Hussein had done, but condemning his humanity and condemning, as they put it, as they suggested, his pretense to be equal to other people, like any head of a state or head of government in the UK or in the West. So Clive Myrie is being kind of celebrated by the racists today as being the next mastermind or next presenter of Mastermind, and by that they're suggesting that actually confirms that black people, like African origin people or Asian origin people, are almost reaching equality with their white predecessors or white models, role models. This is grotesque racist stupidity, because black people and white people are not in need of that kind of comparison. Racism exists throughout the world, okay, number one. But the fact that racism exists does not make it, how shall I say, subject to the rigorous auditing and opposition that it deserves. So in the UK, for example, when the Oprah interview was broadcast, Brenda let it be known that she was very annoyed. She was concerned at the allegation of race and racism by the interviewees, Meghan Markle and Harry. And then yesterday's news was that she has appointed a czar on race. Now, the meaning of Tsar is not at all good. Tsar is a thing that is linked with the Russian regimes. And the Tsar is a kind of unaccountable, ill-considered, and inconsiderate person in post or power. And it is not something that the ordinary people have any access to audit the behavior of, for example. So Tony Blair created a lot of czars, including this absolutely corrupt racist woman called Louise Crazy. Louise Crazy was dug up from the kind of pits of the corrupt, racist, uncivil disservice. And she was given a kind of new life as the czar for all kinds of things. This is like Julie Beach Hell. Julie Beach Hell, who has been forced to apologize to a black woman whose name is very, very odd, because I have said, and I'm going to say it again, this particular individual who has a name that suggests very much that she is a Hindu person, not a Muslim person. I'm going by the name. And the other thing is that in her history, like let's say in the last 2-3 years, when she has been given increasing platforms on the media, this person has grotesquely exhibited her kind of behavior in terms of sex. She has boasted that she has brazenly boasted that she wants unlimited sex. That is totally anathema to Muslim public pronouncements, individual Muslims. I don't know of any Muslim who has ever said anything like that about their personal life, and yet this person, we have supported this person when they have been attacked by Julie Beachell. Notice what we do. We totally disapprove of this person's boasts about sex in the way that she has done, and yet we have supported her human rights when she has been attacked by Julie Beachell. And we shall be continuing with these similar kind of persons, because that is the reality of universality. And it will extend even to the parasites, including Freak Dondi. As I said before, not today, but I said about the 1981 UK-wide conference that I had organized via the Commission for Racist Enslavement in Birmingham. And I was de facto the main keynote speaker at the launching event on a Friday. The whole thing lasted for the weekend. So it started in the evening on Friday, and it went on during Saturday and Sunday, ending on Sunday. And during the evening or early morning of Saturday, we sat down on the flash floor of the hotel to draft the speech for the main event that was going to take place on the Saturday. So I was dictating the draft, if you like, and the others taking my dictation down, or those who were supposed to be taking my dictation down by hand. There was no typewriter, there was no internet, 1981. So included Alex Pascal. Alex Pascal was the presenter of the Radio London, BBC Radio London, Black Londoner. And there was a man called Mukhtar. He's a Senegalese man. Can't remember this minute what his other name or other part of his name was. And Robert Govinda, the journalist who actually practiced in South Africa before coming to the UK, who is no longer around with us. He's passed away. So when I started, I mean, obviously, some of the sentences were not too short. Some of the sentences, by definition, had to be, in the preamble, let's say, quite substantial in length. And then once the length was gone through, we went into the body of what would be the speech. And Alex Pascal and this Mukhtar quite clearly became very nervous, and they were not able to focus on the contents. And one of them, or both of them, threatened to jump out the window. They were showing desperate signs of psychological instability of a nature that forced me to bring an end to the dictation of the speech. Why am I saying this? Because that is reality, that is what happened. And the reason why it happened was because of the rigor that I had put in the contents. And the rigor clearly was unfamiliar with these colleagues. And that is where the difference between struggle and diagnostic action and the opposite, the alternative, either parasite or completely clueless, that difference come in there. And when I began to present what is called the plenary session in the morning on Saturday, I was the main presenter. There was somebody else sitting as the so-called chair, I think. Was it Mukhtar or was it Alex Pascal? Was it Govinda? I don't remember this minute. It was 1981. But I do remember that when I was asked to kind of present the plenary, describe it, and because remember the dictation didn't work out. The dictation I had started didn't get completed. So I didn't want to kind of read out something that had not been completed. So I did the extempo, which was probably more effective than an incomplete kind of script. And when you see when sessions like that take place, you see people passing notes at the top table. So I just passed a note by whoever was chairing the thing. I was the main speaker, but somebody else was chairing. And this person said to me, or wrote to me, what I would do but when I started. And I assumed there is a long tradition of confidentiality of such exchanges. And it will become clear in what I say next as to why confidentiality is such an important thing in that kind of context. So this individual asked me to explain to them, in the notes, what I was going to do as I started. And I said, completely confidentiality, completely in confidence, that I would make them laugh. That is to say, lighten the atmosphere. It's not to make them laugh as it telling jokes or something, but I'd make them come to ease and attend, and that is a better approach to carrying the audience with you. I'd tell a few jokes in really kind of considered way, make them laugh, and then come along. Now, what did the person do next after I wrote that? He read this out to the whole meeting. And it's completely unproductive because although the people laughed at that as well, the point was completely confused. So the main audience at the meeting, although it was against racism and about the media, mainstream media in the UK being, including the BBC. In fact, the BBC was the biggest one in 1981. The Sky wasn't there. Making the BBC less racist and more representative of the population in the contents, in the staff, and all the other things. So I founded this whole idea in terms of holding the BBC to account on race and racism. So that is the event, or that is the symptomatic of the things that I was doing. I wrote 1,000 letters and memos and whatever in the period. In 1 year, 1981, because of the riots and all the other things. So if my colleagues who were, because of the fact that it had been organized by the Commission for Racial Equality at my pressing, nothing to do with me getting any money or anything like that, I politically pressurized the Commission for Racial Equality in 1981 to such an extent that it was forced to convene this weekend conference and spend a very large number of public money in hiring the hotel, paying for the food and everything. This kind of thing had not happened ever, because it was all media people, media people from all the known media outlets, media people belonging to the African and Asian communities and with African and Asian backgrounds. So when it came to the part about the BBC's duties, I was still presenting. I was still answering questions and I was giving explanations. Remember, nothing like that had happened before. And I don't think anything like that has happened since, to follow up what I was proposing and what I was diagnosing. I shall come to discussing other aspects of the consequences of the mainstream media remaining racist and racistly exclusive. And here is a point about the Financial Times article about this person that was, there has been racistly victimized and discriminated against by the Black Rocks, which has earned the name White Rocks or White Rock. The fact that I asked earlier, why has the Financial Times given this article or the commissioned this person to write this piece. A woman called Aziza Kasumov, clearly a Muslim name, a Muslim female name from the Russian bloc, linguistically diagnosing that one. And the answer is partly there because the Financial Times never starts with a paragraph that this one has done, describing quite authentically the summary of the experience of this victim person. So if the mainstream like Fleet Street or the BBC had people from African and Asian backgrounds, genuine African and Asian backgrounds, with genuine commitments to understanding and trying to get across the message based on the evidence of empirical evidence of people's experience of being discriminated against by racists, then change would begin to happen. Not to the extent that it should happen, but it would begin to happen, but not when they have the likes of Clive Myrie or Samira Ahmed in post. Because the amount of money they give to the likes of Samira Ahmed, as they have done, makes her feel less aggrieved and makes her less aggrieved than this person, because she was being targeted for sexual assault by a racist who openly consulted others in the office how he should probably rape her as well, and if he could get away. Now this is happening in New York in an office in the USA, and this is described in the open letter that she has published now in 2021. Now how, this is a woman who was born in the USA, is a US born citizen, young Muslim woman. Although he was born in the USA, she is absolutely clear as to her style, her dress, and everything. And they don't want to let her do it. They want to deny her those rights. She didn't invade the USA as against any bar or barrier that had been put in place by Donald Trump. She hadn't appeared from some other country. So how many commenters in the UK, in Fleet Street, in the period of the last 5 calendar years, have acknowledged the existence of people like this one? People like this one means that looking at her niqab, it is impossible to tell where she is from. She could be from any Muslim country or from any country in the world where she could wear this. So when Shamima Begum was robbed of her passport, citizenship, she was treated like this one. So the common theme, the common thread on which these two young women have been discriminated against and dehumanized is their faith. Although Shamima Begum is being portrayed in the past 10 days, let's say, as trying on Western clothes, as they say. This is being described by Fleet Street as her doing it kind of artificially, that her real convictions still, as they say, are based on the radicalization. But what do they know? What evidence have they got? And without evidence, they're accusing her of something that would appeal to the Little Englanders and the gullibles in a racist, hostile, anti-Muslim way. That is the expectation. Yet, when she did leave the country, UK, there was no kind of mention of her. She became only mentionable when she became part of a group that could be associated with a radical organization, allegedly. Now, this Esme being asked or told to become American, be American, she was not American. She was born in America. What else did they want to do? Because they were saying that her wearing the niqab was not American, and all the other things that she did were not American. Who decides what was American? Why not include the niqab as an American headgear or dress? Application to have the niqab included as an American dress should be made, I think. So we have discussed various aspects, and we have focused on Shamima Begum on the one hand, and this Esme. Let me get used to her second name. I haven't memorized it yet. Esma Bengabsia. So Esma Bengabsia is now being tortured, mentally tortured by the racists and anti-Muslims. And this has been only done, or possible to be done, by Fleet Street maintaining a racist denial of equal coverage to her based on strictly on the facts. So we are stopping here at 10:34 hours GMT as part A, and we shall be continuing part B in due course today.